fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is here to help us.
I'm here for you, Al. This might be my last one of the season, so if I don't talk to you, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy Hanukkah, and all the rest.
Yeah, I guess it's getting close to that. You know, I don't even think about it. This is the last week of recording, so this is almost it. We're almost done.
I feel pretty honored. Last one of the year.
You should be. You are almost yet to be like besides the Christmas shows, you're like show number 199 for the year.
Wow. I snuck in.
Yeah. This is the great Tara Moss. Incredible writer, Australian-Canadian writer, has done some great books. And we're truly honored to have you on because you've done so much. And you started back in the day, 1999 or something, you started publishing books, correct?
That's right. 1999. So, not yesterday.
No.
It's quite surreal, actually. And even seeing the changes in the publishing world over the last couple of decades have really been something. So I feel pretty privileged, first of all, to be on here with you, Alan. Thank you so much. And Joe, thank you. And also just to be published, to be able to have that support from readers and publishers for so long has been an amazing lifelong dream come true for young Tara, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's something that I find particularly interesting is because 1999, we really didn't have this Amazon world and this self-publishing world, and we didn't have a lot of things that are just taken for granted these days. So when you're doing writing and you want to be published in 1999, you had to go through kind of the old term process. Did you even have to type up the manuscript and send it in type thing?
I had to type a physical manuscript. Yes, indeed. I needed to have copies, and there had to be, particular margins, and couldn't have it double-sided, and all, there were all of these very specific requirements for the physical tome. And the thing that really strikes me now as well that editing was so odd, because as you got closer to the book going to the printers, you would get sent the typeset pages that were about 2 feet across. And it would go in a courier envelope and arrive wherever I was. I was often on the road and traveling. And this massive package would arrive that's at least like 2 feet across, weighs a couple of kilos, and it would be the typeset pages. I mean, now it's done electronically, and we have so many emails and back and forth. But yeah, it was couriers arriving with gigantic pages of edited manuscript. So definitely a blast from the past to talk about that, but that's how it was done in those days.
Well, why did you start writing back in 1999? Well, various careers. So.
Yeah, look, I was writing since I was a kid, for better or worse. I was obsessed with Stephen King back in the 80s. Like, all people with good taste were obsessed with Stephen King in the 80s particularly. And when I was 10 years old, I wrote a little gory novelette, I'll call it, called Black and White Doom. And it was written on loose leaf paper with little ghoulish cartoons in the corner that I did with my pen. And it featured the classmates of the school I was going to who were asking to be written in and killed off. And that was fellow 10-year-olds. It was like choose your own adventure story, but choose your own murder, basically, was how that was playing out. And that was the beginning for me, my first reading audience at age 10. So when I published my first book, Fetish, it was 1999. I was 25. I'd been writing that for a few years at that stage. And that was my launch into being a published author. But I'd been, wanting to be published and been a writer for a long time before then.
Wow. Did you have when you did Fetish, did you have the courage to do it at the time, or you were just jumping at the bit and you just wanted it out there? You didn't care what anybody thought?
I was definitely not that confident. I did not have the confidence of, well, I guess a lot of writers don't. We're not a very confident bunch, actually. When you think about it, we tend to be fairly neurotic and or a strange group, right?
Absolutely.
I was definitely an oddball, and there was a short story contest called the Scarlet Stiletto Awards that I could enter, and it was judged blind. So they would remove the author's name from the manuscript. It was a short story. And I wrote one I called Psycho Magnet, where a woman sort of like turns the tables on a killer who's following her, and we're sure she's going to get killed, and the tables get turned. I can give that away because the story is pretty old now. But I won that short story contest, and I realized really in hindsight that I'd put myself forward for that. I felt like that was a possible first step because my name wouldn't be on it. Like if it was as terrible as I feared it was, I'd never have to hear about it again, and this is the days before social media and stuff. So like no one would know. It was just sort of quietly sticking this in the post because it was a physical manuscript again. And when I won that short story award, that's how I got the interest of publishers. I got got my first agent. They asked me what else I was working on, and I was writing Fetish, in my spare time. And said, well, actually, there's a novel I'm writing. And suddenly I was like, well, I better get on with that, because I was only partway through it. Suddenly I had interest. So I was very fortunate to have that opportunity, but I'm acutely aware that it was a real lack of confidence that had prevented me from showing my work to anyone under my own name up until that, after winning that award.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how that is. But do you find that that's changed much now, even though you've got a huge history of now writing and having successes and doing all sorts of things, and you're more seasoned now? Do you still have that quivering stomach when you're about to release a book?
Oh, Alan, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, this morning I was just thinking of how terrible I am as a writer and how I have no idea how to write a novel. And I'm writing my 15th, and I have to keep reminding myself that I know what I'm doing. Not all the time, not every day. When it flows, it's just the most wonderful kind of surge of power that comes through me because, we've all, I hope, had those days as writers where it flows and you're really feeling it. You don't even know where it comes from. It's just a beautiful thing, and you live for those days of writing, but they're not always like that. So this morning I had the laptop open, slightly different device than what I was working with back in 1999. And I was thinking, how am I going to do this? Of course I've done it before, but you always have to kind of relearn how to write, I think. Because every book is different. Every page is different. Every writing day is different. So I'm afraid I haven't quite cured myself yet of that lack of confidence.
I don't know if we ever do, really. Because I find the same thing. It was just yesterday because I'm doing a couple of projects. And when I just opened up the computer and I started doing something, it was just, oh my God. I'm useless. Why am I even bothering? I'm a terrible writer. Forget it. You know what I mean? Like you just have that. And I just closed the lid on the computer and thought, well, time to go to work on the radio program then.
That's right. You want to just put it away for now. Let's just change the mindset, because I think so much of writing actually is a kind of psychological battle. I'd love to believe that it shouldn't be, but every writer I've spoken to has some version of this. So it seems to be part and parcel of the creative process. I think it might be that way for artists, for, songwriters, for other people who create. You're just looking for that inspiration, and it hits. When it hits, it's incredible, but it's not like every hour of every writing day you're being hit with this incredible inspiration. There's a lot of times where you wonder when it's going to come.
Yeah. I think that for me, what I found is I've kind of accepted, I know my weaknesses. And I grew up on the spectrum, and in the 60s, that was not great in Canada or the US, because it was more of you're being a bad child. You're not speaking, you're not, socializing, you're not following a lot of the rules. So they kind of didn't do as much as they do today. But I found that even on radio, I've learned kind of what I need in order to get the job done correctly. And I think that's the same in writing. You kind of learn what it takes to get yourself to do what you want to do or need to do to get the book complete. And I wonder if it's the same for someone like you, who's more normal.
I wouldn't call myself very normal.
Yeah, well, I had to say that. I don't know what else to say. Normal.
Yeah, I struggle with stuff like fatigue. I've got CRPS, which is a pain condition, and it's again different. It's just another type of difference. Everybody's got all these different quirks and differences, and hopefully they make us, I don't know, they make us more interesting in a way, or give us a slightly different perspective. So for me, I kind of work on, what's the right setting and timing? When am I going to have the burst of energy? When is the inspiration most likely to come? And what do I need to put myself in the place of my characters and the character that is location? For me, I'm pretty heavy on the detail. I hear this a lot from readers who enjoy it, or reviewers who sometimes don't. I love detail. I want to see everything and feel and touch everything. So putting myself in the physical locations I'll be writing about is one of the ways I know that I can make the work happen. It's part of what puts the fire under me and makes me feel like, I'm there and I can just write it out onto the page. Even though it's fiction, I need the locations to be real. So I was very lucky just to be in Italy recently. I got back from Naples a few days ago, and what a town, just extraordinary.
Jealous, jealous here.
And I have never been there, Joe, before this past couple of weeks. It was extraordinary. That's one of the reasons. One of the things I live for in the books is kind of to learn about a new place and learn about just the minutia of the culture and the history. It's a snapshot. You can't learn everything, but just being thrown into that is always so inspiring for me. So I've come back with all of these scenes in my head and scenes I had planned before doing that research trip that are now just vivid and alive. And like you said, Alan, you find ways to work, you find what you need. And for me, the locations are one of the things I need. With The Ghosts of Paris, the latest book, and the one before that, The War Widow, because they are set historically, I'm getting to locations that have to have been around then and getting access. And I want to see the tiles. I want to touch the walls. I want to go into the crypt, literally. And I was really lucky to be able to do that recently in Naples. And I know that's gives my work such a boost.
Well, I was going to ask that. You write historical fiction, so how do you use those old characters, living history, to bring them alive in stories today? Yeah,
for me, I find that there's a kind of like a family of characters that are my center, because it's an ongoing series. Isn't it that familiar little family of characters that are built on an amalgam of people from the time and people I know and people I'm imagining? They take on their own lives, but they have to be placed in a location which is, again, like another character in the book to me. And that requires getting on the ground, learning about the history and what was happening at the time. So, you know, Italy went through such a massive change. You know, Mussolini was out. They were throwing fascist statues down into the underground to smash them and get them out of their way. Just a huge change in the lifestyle, and really tough poverty and post-war experiences for people. You know, if you watch The Bicycle Thief, or you look into the history of the time, you can really get a taste of that. So that just really comes alive. And I find that when you take your characters, your beloved characters, and put them into that setting, that's when, you know, the magic happens. And I like to always see a link between, well, I think there is a link. I don't have to see it. It's there regardless. There's the link between the past and the now. We got here through history, didn't we? We're not arriving out of nothing. And what you see when you do historical, or what, for me, what I love about doing historical mystery or noir or hardboiled or whatever we're going to call it, is that we're getting that sense of like where we came from. We're seeing how the experiences of the characters then still, you know, those experiences reverberate now through families, through situations, through, you know, the social and cultural changes that we're still going through.
No, I'd say, because I agree with you wholeheartedly, because in my college classes, I say everything's connected.
Yes.
Right? Nothing just appeared for you. Right? If you want to use virtual reality, that's a Viewmaster and a 3D stereograph from the 1800s. They're directly related. So understand, I call it living history, and that's what you do. But why'd you pick the 40s? What was it about the 40s that made you say, that's my time in the past?
Well, one of these things, and I know your listeners can't see this, but I'm showing you a picture of my Oma. She's an example of why it's got to be the 40s. There's an image of her riding a bicycle in the 1940s in Holland. And I grew up on their stories from World War II. I chose to write these books in an immediate post-war setting because I feel like there's a lot of sort of war books about the war and the big players, the big politics of the time and so on. But I wanted to look at the aftermath. And when I think of my Oma and Opa in the 1940s, the Nazi occupation, how the Nazis came and took my Opa away because he was, you know, an able-bodied man, as they called it, put him to work in a munitions factory as a slave laborer. And my Oma, because he was a baker by trade, she would smuggle sugar and flour in the hollows of that bicycle, in that photograph. And she would ride it past a bunch of Nazi checkpoints all across the Netherlands, going to Berlin, where this munitions factory was, so she could deliver those smuggled ingredients to my Opa. He used those to bake bread in the munitions ovens next to the bombs, to bribe the foreman, the German foreman. He was successful finally. The guy liked his bread so much. You can imagine what it was like in the 40s, that it was possible to bake bread in a munitions oven and have someone go, God, this is the best thing I've tasted in ages.
The bomb.
You know, and yeah, exactly. And he got a day pass, and that's how he escaped the Nazis. That's probably why he lived to be till his 90s. And it's those stories of resilience, that the dynamism and resilience that we see from the stories of the time, that really inspired me. And so that's why I chose the 1940s. That and my obsession with Raymond Chandler, with kind of pulp, fiction and noir, with those hard-boiled dames. You know, I love the fast-talking people of action in those stories, and I wanted to do my own take on it.
Yeah. I've been listening to a lot of the Raymond Chandler lately. Interesting stuff. Now, one of my points is that I see is what I find very important too, also about giving the details of the location and what was going on, like just some of the experiences you just talked about. I think that's really important because so many people in today's society and the social climate, they don't understand what it was like during that time, you know, and I think that it puts your characters more into real context than than if you didn't have it in the book.
I agree. And honestly, when you talk about social climate, and I think about the times we're living through, and it is such a different perspective, a different pace. And having written a contemporary crime fiction series where there was my main character, Mac Vanderwall, and there was, DNA and forensics and all that kind of, serial killer profiling, all that type of stuff going on. It's really nice to go backwards into our history a little bit, where people did not have a mobile phone. They had to find other ways to get information. They had to find other ways to navigate things. And I think it's just kind of refreshing to read that. It's not better or worse, in my opinion. It's just a really interesting, evocative time to place yourself in. And again, those parallels to today, we don't arrive out of nothing. We see this huge part of our history and how it's impacted lives, a long shadow of war, that, there's fewer and fewer living participants from those wars, but we're still impacted by all that. And as a writer, it's just really fun to go back in time and know that it's not going to be just a matter of them going like, oh, I'll just give them a call and see if they're okay. As a mystery writer, it's so delightful to be able to, throw out those regular things that you do and think, now, what would they do? How do you survive this? I mean, my Oma would be listening to secret, radio messages on some revolutionary group that were putting out messages on a contraband radio frequency. It's just like a completely different way of doing things. And now we'd think, well, obviously I would give them a text, see if they're okay.
Yeah. Well, we just take so much for granted.
Yes.
Of what, just go out and buy your loaf of bread. Just go do the rationing and all the things that you bring into the story. It's just a complete surprise. And someone that's younger than us would have no clue. So I think it's fascinating.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think the rationing and, needing to have a coupon for a bit of fabric so you can clothe yourself, and thinking about what that loaf of bread meant to my Opa or to that foreman. That loaf of bread would have been enough to make him go, sure, I'll give you a day pass. It's going to save your life, It
really wasn't that long ago.
And it's not that long ago. That's right.
I was born 15 years after the war. In my life, that would have been the Roaring 20s. Today, we go back that time, it's the Roaring 20s. Now you go back, it's World War II. So it's unbelievable this stuff happened in a year. And that's what you were trying to capture. I feel in your historical fiction books. What did you find differently when you were writing the contemporary books thematically versus the historical fiction books thematically, that everything's sort of connected?
Writing contemporary was interesting because I was always trying to look for what was the latest, like what's the newest thing that they would use, because that would be exciting as a writer and a reader. So I was looking at that time, it seems not so new now, but I went to the FBI Academy at Quantico and met with profilers, and it was like they were trying to unpick the minds of serial killers. That was what was happening in the 90s and the early 2000s. Reading Patricia Cornwell, and, you've got Thomas Harris and Silence of Lambs. That was a kind of moment that was happening. And I was very influenced by that and learning so much about psychology. Like that was, a detection tool. We know that's rather imperfect, but it was a time of development of that sort of way of thinking. This is just so different because you're looking at a lot of things that are more, how do you put it, more, I don't know, it's more like tangible and physical, the things that people are experiencing. It was very psychological, the work from the 90s, I think. And that stuff, when you're looking at the 40s, it's really getting down and dirty. I mean, as we were saying, like a loaf of bread, a gun, a single coat. These were kind of the objects, the things that were part of the story in a way. Whereas in the 90s, there was a lot of thinking, a lot of talking, a lot of, doing detection work from a distance. And then there would be some scene where it all came crashing together. And that was always the most fun part because I love some action. I guess in the 1940s for me, there's a different type of grittiness. I don't know, readers will be able to tell me if they agree, possibly not, but that's the feeling for me right now in the writing, is that there's a real physicality to the period when I dropped my characters into the 40s.
Well, you're writing about lives lived.
Yes.
As opposed to contemporary where people are living life.
Yeah.
Which is a slightly different angle.
Yeah, and the weight that's put on a cup of tea or a bit of butter, or, the outfit that, say, Billie Walker, my PI character, what she's wearing to blend in when she goes into that high end of town, where she saved that piece of silk so she could sew that outfit together to look like she belonged in that room. These are things we take completely for granted, but they matter. And they mattered in Chandler's work too. If you look at Philip Marlowe, he had a keen eye for clothing details, details of everything, but he looked at, collar and cuff, the shoe, because of what it said about the character, what it said about their social status, what their intentions were, who they're trying to be. And those are things I can do with The War Widow and The Ghosts of Paris. And they just weren't as relevant in the contemporary series because clothing has become a completely different thing for the modern day, if you will.
Right, right. And your stance of what you're wearing is not as important.
Yeah, and it's going to change all the time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not for me in real life, but for most people, there's a huge turnover for clothing. I actually wear some of the 1940s clothes, which I quite enjoy.
Yeah.
That's quite fun, and they're made incredibly well, so they'll probably last another 75 years again. But I know that's not the norm.
Well, but I do that too. I get into older clothing myself. I'm really into that. I think I get mesmerized by it that once in a while you see this old film from someone just filming something going on in a street, in 1941, kids playing and people walking and doing their thing. I'm mesmerized by those. You could just sit there and watch them for hours just to see how people lived and acted and what they were doing in their day. It's something real,
Yeah. It's a little bit more real in Europe, or at least from the recent trip as well. I did research in some areas that are not wealthy areas. And if you look at the people living their lives, the Italians, still there's a degree to which they're living in ways that do hark back to several decades ago. It's someone that is on their moped in their one suit that they have, carrying a tray of espressos and somehow navigating the cobblestones. I don't even know how that acrobatic stuff is possible, but it's, it reminds me of my Opa in his one suit. He didn't get around in track pants. I wear them, of course, but he had his one suit. He had his thing, and you're still seeing in a lot of districts, if it's not the wealthy areas, that there's a way in which people present themselves that's sort of similar to those old films, and that was pretty cool for me to soak up. I was really privileged to see that.
Now your main character, Billie Walker, I have to say, you've given her a tough life. Okay, you're a little bit mean there. So is this someone that because what was the father's dead and her husband right at the beginning in the War Widow, and then the husband's missing, and it's just the war's just ended. She has to take on her father's job type thing. So you got all this stuff going on, and wow, I mean, okay, well, let's just,
Yeah.
So
I don't give her an easy time, that's for sure.
No, and I must say too, it probably even taking her father's job after a war of investigation was probably not something that was looked at too positively in society, because private investigation is a man's job.
Yeah.
Right.
Private investigation had a pretty bad rap too. Not all of it undeserved, but a fair chunk of it undeserved. Because in that period, the only way you could get a divorce was to have photographic evidence of adultery. or abandonment, which was much harder to prove. So if there was something going on domestically that was pretty nasty, you actually required a private investigator. People didn't much like that association. It gave them a bad rap that they were sneaking around looking for adulterers, but actually they were serving a very important civic function. On the other hand, there wasn't another way around that. So Billie Walker, as a woman and taking on that kind of work, yeah, and not the kind of person you want to necessarily like introduce to your mom or invite to your high-end party, right? But she's got a really interesting mix of attributes because she was a reporter during World War II. When she was in Paris, she was chasing Nazis across Europe during the war, and when the war was over, as we know, there was this real push to kind of say, thanks, ladies, for your time in the factories and the newsrooms. You can go back in the kitchen now.
Yeah.
Bye, and really there wasn't a friendly attitude towards women having paid work outside the home. There was a desire to make sure those jobs were available for returned soldiers. And there was also this wanting to return to a pre-war attitude about gender, I suppose. But a lot had changed. And for Billie, she doesn't have a husband to look after her. She probably isn't that way inclined anyway. And she has all those amazing skills from being a reporter, and she wants to put them somewhere. So she restarts her late father's private investigation agency. And like you said, there's resistance, socially. It's not easy for her.
Well, you create your characters, obviously, and you created Billie, but how much of you is in Billie?
Oh, I have a bit of me probably in all my main heroines. Each one I've written has some kind of, I feel like we could all be part of the same girl gang, We would hang out at the bar and drink champagne cocktails together for sure. I love Billie, but I'm not her. And I think if I identified too closely with her, it would probably limit my ability to be mean to her. I'm not that masochistic. I couldn't imagine I was her and then do some of the things I have to. I don't know what the quote is, but there is a beautiful quote out there about, killing your darlings. In my case, I just torture them a little bit with difficulties of life. And, life isn't always roses, right? It's true. My life hasn't been easy in a lot of ways, but I still feel really lucky. And I think that Billie is, again, a woman who's really lucky, but she's had some pretty rough experiences too. She's had loss, she's had grief, and I think that it helps her to be better at her job. It helps her to understand her clients maybe a little bit more, and kind of keeps us on our toes as readers, I think. You never quite know what's going to happen to her because you know that I'll go there. Mercilessly.
With the whips and everything.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't write cozies. I love some of the cozies out there. Like Iona Wishaw writes this wonderful series set in Nelson in the 40s. It's really clever, but it's very cozy by comparison. It's different style. I'll enjoy, reading it, but when I'm writing, I like a lot of action, and I like a lot of, danger and darkness. And that just seems to be the way I roll. So you can expect that when you pick up a Tara Moss book, right?
It's not soft reading.
Well, no, I mean, I'm sure there's aspects that are, like, I hope there's a little bit of humor and there's a little bit of glamour and there's other things that are, could be called soft. They're fun. But then I'm also going to go there. And I'm also going to hopefully really make you feel for the characters. And like you said, I'm going to be mean to them. Sorry.
You ever feel like you've gone too far? That just say, I just can't do that. I got to back off on that particular thing.
There's this really notable scene that comes to mind right now when you say that, Joe, because at the end of towards the end of my contemporary crime series with Mac Vanderwall, there's this horrifying scene with I won't even, there's a beloved character that I kill, and my main character rides the edge of ethics in a way that makes you not sure you like her anymore. And I feel like in real life that would happen. if you were in that situation, you're talking about bad people, like no holds barred, bad people, bad stuff going on. You would do that to survive. But I apparently wrote the baddies so well that people actually didn't like her doing what she did to them. So I heard about that a lot from readers. I wouldn't change it, but it might have been one of those times where I went too far. And just got to go with your own judgment and think, what would you do in those circumstances? Would you do anything to survive? Well, yeah, probably. So I made that call. And yeah, there were some people who were pretty, why did you have to do that? I don't know. Just seemed like the right call, can I say?
I think we all have that experience at some point. I did the same thing. It's really gruesome seeing the guys trying to escape being kidnapped, basically. And I didn't know. I just said, what are you going to do to get out of this? You're going to do anything, absolutely anything to live. And don't tell me you won't. Yep. But people focused on that because it's, that's gross and gruesome. Yeah. Really?
Yeah, it's gross and gruesome, but then you're like, and look who they're doing it to and in what circumstances. Like, yeah. You can't talk your way out of this. Sometimes violence is necessary in these crime novels, you know. Where's your first clue? We're going to go there, right? But yeah, no, I definitely have had circumstances where I wondered, like, oh, maybe I've taken it too far. But in general, as a writer, I have given myself license now to go there completely. And if I want to in the editing later, I can pull it back. And I had to be really strong with myself there because my self-doubt would get in the way otherwise. I would think, oh, that's too much, and I would never write it. I've found that 99% of the time, I'm not going hard enough. So I end up giving myself license to just go all the way, to go 110% and then find out that's totally out of balance, pull it back to 100, you know. But yeah, maybe on that occasion I went too far.
You're explaining the competence growth from 1999.
You're right.
Right? Yeah. Wouldn't have done that in 1999.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Now you said, here it comes. Get out of the way.
First book, for sure. And, you know, there's things I would change, sure. I was in my 20s when I wrote the first one. I hope that I have matured and become, certainly, you know, matured and become more seasoned in my way. And, yeah, you become more confident about certain things, despite my, you know, despite the ways in which I could be more confident generally. You do learn how to have a confident hand in your writing when you're doing it. You know, when you can sit down and go, okay, I'm really doing it. You know, you've got license actually to go there. And that's, I think, a good moment in your career when you realize, I'm just going to go all the way and see.
Now, the book 2, The Ghosts of Paris. So this is a continuation with your lead character there and Billie Walker. So originally, when you were doing the very first book, did you have this in mind, that this would be a series? This was someone that you wanted to take on quite a few different adventures with?
I did, Al. I wanted to find a character to live with. I tend to do series. It seems to be, I don't know, just my style. I never seem to get enough of my characters in one book. I want to keep exploring with them and keep pushing them and putting different obstacles in their paths. And for me, Billie Walker with The War Widow was a kind of launching point for her, and that little, the constellation of characters around her. And so The Ghosts of Paris was just beautiful to return to them and to be back in Billie's world. And right now for the next book, I won't give you the draft title because who knows, it'll probably change, but just being in her world again is wonderful and seeing the progression. So The Ghosts of Paris is set in 1947. The next one's set in 1948 that I'm writing at the moment and has Italy obviously in it. And for me, it's a great way to just feel into those characters, see what they're going to do, see what all of that background, that backstory is going to make them do when new things arise. I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of being a writer, is creating the characters. And I guess I'm a very character-driven writer. So that's probably why I'm attracted to series.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you say you're the character-driven writer, so you develop your character first, usually. Is that true?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and with Billie, she just arrived fully formed, but I know she was like baking or stewing or whatever metaphor we're going to use in the background for years before she kind of arrived and said, "I'm here and ready to go."
well,
So yeah, character first.
so how do they come to you, or how do you see them? How do you interact with your main character like this?
With Billie, she arrived quite fully formed, I think, because of the stories I'd been hearing for decades, family stories, the films, the film noir that I'm obsessed with. You know, she's like Philip Marlowe, if it was Ava Gardner, with a touch of, you know, she's got this wonderful combination of attributes I love and other things that are just new and specific to her and just arrive spontaneously. What I find, though, is when I'm developing new characters, I can't even imagine a pre-Billie moment with this book. She arrived sort of before I started the series. With characters that I need to create while I'm writing the series, that's always a really tricky thing. I need to kind of think about them, research them, maybe even put a photo on my wall. And then at some point in the writing, hopefully really soon, and it doesn't take too long, they start speaking. Once that happens, once they have a voice that just starts spilling out, I know I've got them. I've got that character now. They're real to me. But it doesn't happen necessarily overnight. So when I'm creating a character, I'm trying to make that magic happen, and they will arrive in the writing. After all the research and everything else in preparation, they still don't arrive until I'm writing them.
Well, you mentioned, I'm going to ask a process question here. This is totally selfish because I'm stuck myself, so I'm hoping you can give me some guidance. You write short stories too, correct? Or
I do.
Well, how do you do all that character development and place as a character when you have 3,000 words, whatever your length is, versus 90,000 words? I'm stuck right now. So help me out here, Tara. I'm taking notes.
I'm not a great person to ask that of, Joe, because I find short stories as hard as novels, and I shouldn't. Like, one is a much bigger project than the other, but they both still need characters and they need a story, and it needs to have that, I'm going to call it magic or spark or whatever. It has to arrive. So I'm actually not a great person to ask. I always feel like there's ways to do this work that's a lot more efficient, that's a lot more, less painful. I never find those ways.
We're twinsies here.
There we go. So I'm not sure that there's a special method. I have tried a lot of different process methods, and to varying degrees of success. The wall covered in all the Post-it notes and the arrows and there you go. You got your Post-it notes. I got, a little bit here too. I've got pictures as mood boards, whatever. I haven't tried a lot of software, but I do like Scrivener, the way you can kind of pop things in little side things in the one document. You can have these little sections for characters and locations. I don't really use it. I just am pretty much, it's up here. It either arrives or it doesn't, and all the other work is just laying the foundations for that arrival, hoping that all that research, all the things that are inspiring me and drawing me to the story, make it possible for that character or that scene to just arrive and come to life. And pretty much it always does. It always happens. I always fear that it won't, but it does. It arrives.
I'm in the neurotic phase rather than confident phase right now.
There you go.
Yeah.
I wrote that one down.
Very familiar. Very familiar. And I have to keep reminding myself, like, you felt this way for all the other 14 books. Like,
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
If there's anything I've learned, it's that I can expect this feeling.
Yeah.
And that is.
Yeah. It's kind of like you're going for a medical test, and you just know what to expect.
Yeah, that's right. I'm like, this won't be fun, but I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then something good will come of it. And for me, it'll be that beautiful scene that arrives, and I'll just know, and I don't know how I know, but it's all those clues, all those foundations, all of it is important to the work. You're just waiting for the arrival to happen.
Yeah. So, Joe, it's like going for a colonoscopy.
Yeah, it's not the test; it's the results you worry about.
Yeah.
It's the feedback and the reviews. Yeah.
You can have to drink that juice and then,
Okay, go ahead. Fine. I've done that before, but it's when I'm talking to the doctor. He goes, "I got to talk to you." Oh no, it's a bad review. Oh, it's feedback. Oh my gosh, the quick results are in.
Yeah.
That's what I worry about.
Yeah.
I worry about that reader.
Yeah. Oh, well, Tara, so in this series here that you got going on with these two books here, it's quite kind of a deep subject in a sense, because we are still talking about the war and Nazis, and there's still some heavy ideas here for people. Yeah. Do you actually have a subtext or a point, or when someone picks up these books and reads them, of course there's all of the drama and things that go on with the story, but do you have something underlying that you really want a reader to take away from your books?
That's a good question. I try to avoid that. I guess I try to avoid having a message, but I also know that my perspective is influenced by, a couple of decades as a human rights advocate. So I'm hoping that I use my experience being close to front lines or with refugees and with displaced kids and things, that I'm using those perspectives to kind of make the humans more human in the book. I think the social justice elements, they have been written about by reviewers before, and I like that and I accept that, but I'm also quite careful. I try to just make the story what the story is, I guess is what I'm saying. I try not to, it's not a moral story. Characters do things they're not supposed to do. We're all complicated. I'm complicated. It's just got to be about, life. It's a slice of life, I guess. But I'm also aware that those social justice elements inevitably come through. And I find some of those facts just really interesting. So the history is fun. Like there's a scene in The Ghosts of Paris, for example, where she comes into the Paris Ritz hotel. She's wearing silk trousers, and they tell her she's not allowed to do that because trousers are illegal in Paris in 1947. It's insane, but that was the case at the time, and until fairly recently, in fact. And that's a really interesting slice of history. Just the fact that you can have all this sort of, they've had a war, much more important things going on, and they're still going to have this quibble over, like, I don't know, she's wearing silk trousers, like, that's illegal. You needed a police permit to do that, right? So actually just dropping those little things in, I just think makes it richer, and I try not to make the story about those things, but they're still part of the world that the characters are inhabiting. So that's, whether I succeed in that or not is not for me to say, but my attempt is to just make the best story I can and to make it feel like, you're getting a perspective that maybe you might not get if it's not my novel. You're just going to see things through a slightly different lens.
But that's important. I think that's it's more of an organic subtext in a sense. It just comes from things like that, like what you just described, is something that if someone is thinking beyond the story, they'll realize that a woman can't buy silk trousers for, like you just sort of, you start to put it together and hopefully, and I think organically it's better than being preached to, right? So,
well, that's it. I want to avoid the preaching, but I also want to use the realities, and I'm going to emphasize that, realities that are not necessarily a normal part of the fiction of the time. Like, for example, writing a female PI is not making stuff up because they existed. There were female PIs. She's in Sydney. There were others that were operating at the time. We just literally haven't read about them. They weren't the norm, but they existed and they needed to, put food on their table. When I look at the contemporary fiction of the time, of course, it's all male detectives, PIs, private detectives. The only exception that I've personally found, and I'd love your listeners to tell me if they know of any as well, is a 1940s, like contemporary, published at the time series by Gail Gallagher, with a character called Gail Gallagher in the book. Gail Gallagher was actually, it was a husband and wife team who wrote under that nom de plume. They wrote a female PI in the US in the 40s that was published in the 40s. I have not found anything else, even though I've found a lot of evidence of PIs who were women at that time. So writing a female PI, it's not like, oh, she's really, making a statement. It's actually that I'm writing something with just that slightly different perspective. I'm looking at reality, if you will, through a slightly different lens that maybe makes it more, I don't know, it's just kind of a little more unexpected, or it's showing you a side that you hadn't thought of before, perhaps. And being a fan of the genre, it's for me more refreshing because I'm pretty familiar with the other great classics and I love them. And I want to do something that's maybe a little bit different, but still tips the hat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's great. It's good. Okay. So how do people find you? Like, do you interact a lot on social media? Do you have a website? Do you have, where do they find Tara?
I do. Thank you. I'm at taramoss.com, but you can find me on Instagram, Tara Moss Author, and Facebook, Tara Moss Author. I'm quite active and happy to interact. Always love hearing from readers. I love hearing, what people are reading at the moment, what they're loving, and if they've read my books, what they liked, what they didn't like. I want to hear all of it. And I've also, it's been a great source of inspiration as well, because people will send me cool articles about the 1940s and things happening at the time, or family stories. I find it really rewarding. So The Ghost of Paris is the latest one. It's out now. The War Widow is the first in that series, and you don't have to read them in order. You can just, if you enjoy it, read more of Billie Walker. And I've got a new short story out in Black is the Night, the Cornell Woolrich tribute anthology. The story is called The Husband Machine. It's pretty dark. And it's a play on Rear Window. The movie you'd all be familiar with, that was based on Cornell Woolrich's short story. So yeah, there's a few things out there. I hope people enjoy it, and I'd love to hear from them.
I'm sure it sounds really fascinating. It's been, you should, I was going through your history too. You did the documentary series Tough Nuts. It sounds like you should write something on that.
Yeah, I would love to. The Tough Nuts, Australia's Hardest Criminals. Funny title. I didn't choose it, but
no, it's something that sounds like something I would write.
It's cool, right? I love
Exactly.
Tough Nuts.
Yeah.
We did 2 seasons of that, and it was just so fascinating. So I'm a fiction writer, but a documentary lover. I did a true crime podcast, The Man in the Balaclava, as well, about a series of pretty harrowing murders and sexual assaults in Australia that are unsolved. So I really do love true crime and real life and history. And I guess I funnel it all into my fiction books. So it depends on what you like. You can find me in a few different flavors.
Yeah. When I left Australia, I left my balaclava there. So.
Oh, you did? Okay. So, I got no chance of
no chance.
My flavor's vanilla.
Yeah. Well, you're
not even French vanilla.
French vanilla, yeah.
French vanilla, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, and I was going to say, well, at least in your fiction, you get to decide who's going to pay for the crime.
Oh, that's nice. I do like. I don't know if I'll call my work poetic, but that poetic justice is, it's one of the perks of being a fiction writer, isn't it? And of course, things in real life, they're never so neatly tied up.
No.
And that I think works for a series too, that you're not going to come to the end of one of my books and go, oh, look at the pretty bow on the end of it. Everybody's fine. Everything's done. It's all solved. There's going to be aspects that carry over because life just doesn't fit in a box, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Well, I've certainly enjoyed. This has been a great conversation, and we really loved having you on here. And we could talk for hours, I think. There's so much to get into. Especially, I want to get into the tough nuts.
Yeah. I'll send you some nuts if you don't have them. There's the Razor Wars, the Razor Gang Wars in the 1920s in Sydney. If you don't know about those, you will enjoy dipping a toe in. It's pretty fascinating history and dark. It gets dark.
Sounds Peaky Blinders.
Yeah. It was such a pleasure to speak with you both. Thank you, Alan and Joe, and thanks to all the listeners as well. And keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you out there, I hope.
Yeah. No, thank you. Our guest has been the one and only Tara Moss. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.